Hi, welcome to Business is Personal. I'm so excited today to have Flo Akinbiyi with me today. We're going to be talking about authenticity in presentation. We're going to talk about the distinction between energy and passion and how to use rhetorical tools. And don't forget, if you haven't connected with me on LinkedIn, please do that and please join the podcast for this show. Do you feel disconnected at work? Are you feeling exhausted? Almost like you hate your job and secretly maybe your boss too? This is Business is Personal, a blueprint to discovering and creating meaning at work in collaboration with Smashy TV, a live streaming service in the Middle East for the driven, the dreamers, and the doers. Hi, I'm Dr. Corrie. Welcome to Business is Personal. I'm so excited today to have my guest, Flo Akinbiyi.
You got it.
Oh, I struggled so much trying to pronounce this guy's name, but I want to get people's names right because words are meaningful and some of the first words that we learn are our own names, so it's important. So anyway, I'm really excited to have you here. He's been in Dubai since 2010. He's worked with at least 1,500 one-on-one coaching clients in terms of communications and public speaking. And so I'm really excited today to focus on the meaningfulness of words. But before we do that, I want to give Flo a 30-second window to tell you what he does and what he's about. Go on.
Well, here's what I do. I work as a presenter and as a communication coach. And I love what I do. And you know why I love what I do? Because if you improve your communication skills, you can really improve your life. And it sounds very cheesy, but it is true. Look at this. I'll tell you one example, right? I worked with one specific client on his public speaking skills. And as a result, he wrote 2 books. I never told him that, but this is what happens, right? So people that I work with, they get promotions, they win more business, and it's really exciting. So have a chat with me if you want to improve your communication skills, because this is really how you can take your goals and your dreams and your life to the next level.
I think this is a really important topic, actually, because this is one of the breakout themes of Business is Personal, is the meaningfulness of words.
It is.
Right? Words are so important. And sometimes with the ubiquity of words and how many of them we engage with, interact with, consume, and give out every day, we lose track of how important it is to clarify our meaning, to choose the right words, to communicate well. And so that's why I'm really excited that you're here, is because I want to concentrate on that, because I'm so excited about I like when I get somebody in the chair with me who's as passionate about things that I'm passionate about. And I think communication and the meaningfulness of words is that topic for today. So why don't you tell me what are the most meaningful things in terms of communications that you've come across?
Well, that's always a challenging question, right? Because it's, why I find it difficult, it's the same as if somebody says, what are the main tips to become a great presenter?
Right, exactly.
Very difficult. However, there's a few things that I find very difficult, right? And the first thing that just fits really well your book, Business is Personal, is for me that communication, presentation skills are always human to human.
Right.
And that's what people forget, right? When you think about corporate presentations or whether it's on the big stage or in a small meeting room, it's so often just focused on facts and business. But where's that human connection, right? It's still two humans talking, and it's a human that will sign it off. It's not AI. And that's definitely one of the biggest things. And if you translate that then into your delivery, it's that authentic delivery, right? It's a real person talking to another one. And that's really something.
It's the same when you're on stage, right? Like I can be on stage in front of 1,000 people and I'm always just talking to one person at a time. And I'm constantly moving around the audience, but I'm trying to grab eye contact because then my presentation is much more authentic.
It is.
When I'm speaking to someone and I feel like I'm talking to another human.
It is.
You know what I mean?
It is.
I think one of the most challenging things that 2020, the whole COVID thing, brought is this transition to digital presentation. And now the advantage is that I can make eye contact with 125 executives at Microsoft all at the same time, right? But then I'm not actually making eye contact with any of them. I'm making eye contact with a little camera on my computer. And
that is something, right? If you are ahead of the game, because if you think about it, what do really people do when they deliver virtual communication? They do not look at the camera. They look at the screen. They look at their slides. They do not care really about the audience, right? They don't do this. They just look at the content.
Right.
And that's exactly where you see where people don't focus enough on that connection, right? They rather focus on the content.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. And so for you, like in terms of your presentation style or the way that you the way that you train or coach executives to do their presentations, how is it that you get them to break through the material and get into authenticity? Because that's really the challenge, is understanding your material, choosing your words, and then getting into a place where you can communicate authentically. How do you get them to that authentic place?
Well, for me, the style that I have developed over the years, and it's been really years and years of coaching, and I work with so many companies and individuals, and what I found out is I want to show people the great tools that I found around communication and presentation skills, whether it's from me, myself being on the stage, or whether it's from observing many presentations. My background is event management, right? So I've got really this 360-degree view around communication.
Sure.
And what I found out is if you show people all the tools, then they have that opportunity to look at, oh wow, storytelling is what is in my DNA and I need to do more of it. And here's a few frameworks that I can use. Someone else is really good with body language and they can play more around with that. Other people have already a powerful voice and they understand how they can do more with it. I'll give you one example. That's actually a really cool one. So I worked with a design director in the US, in Seattle. And his background actually was that he was a DJ and he was composing music and he was doing many cool things. His presentations, of course, very boring, very dry, and he got very nervous, and because he also forgot who he really is as a presenter, as a speaker. Now, what he ended up doing after 2-3 months, and there was a bit of silence, which always makes me a little bit nervous because you don't know, did something happen, did it not? So he reached out then after a while and he said, Flo, what I do now is completely different. I mean, I've been doing company meetings and I was playing music in between and I'm just taking it to a whole nother level and everybody's loving it because he's just using what he has in his suitcase of tools and skills, and that's what he now does more. But you have to sometimes liberate people, show them the tools, show them examples of world-class speakers so they can understand what they can do for themselves.
No, I totally agree. I think when I'm also coaching my clients on their presentation skills in boardrooms, typically, I don't coach on stage speaking, I coach on boardroom presentation. I was working with one CIO from Italy actually not so long ago that had, like, for his board of directors, 67 slides on his slide deck for his IT strategy. And I'm like, no, dude, you can't do that. Why don't you just tell them impact? What are your customer segments and what is the impact that what you're doing is going to have on them? And then you can get into budgetary issues. But yeah, just breaking it down into something simple that your audience can actually, and then that makes it more authentic as well, is when you talk about impact. What is the impact of the information that you're bringing? Why is it important? Not just to your audience, but maybe to your audience's clientele. Whether they're internal clientele as other internal customers like stakeholders or employees or partners or external clients and customers.
I agree. For me, it's always, when I think about boardroom presentations, very often to think about focus on the big picture first, right? Exactly as you said. You've got 67 slides. Let's trim it down to 20, understand what's really the core, what's the value, and all these 40 other slides, 50 other slides, put them in the appendix, right? If we want to dive into details afterwards, we can do that.
Like a leave behind.
Exactly. But let's first understand what's the big picture. What do I really need to get out of it?
No, I told him, I said, if you can't say it in 5 slides, you can't say it. That's it. So he's like, what? He's freaking out. Like, just say it in 5 slides, whatever you got. And so he did a good job, right? He actually got it down, but it was forcing him into that pigeonhole of, okay, less information and more quality information. And that's where I think I want to segue back into the meaningfulness of words as part of business is personal, because communication isn't just about putting information out there, but choosing the information, presenting it in the right way, and then even the tone and nonverbals around how we say it, of course, is extremely important when we're trying to convey meaning, because the words themselves are only like 7% of the meaning. So I know I've heard
it's not true.
We've questioned that research now. So I don't know what the current research is on that, but I know that the words that we're using is a very small piece of the meaning that we convey. And so the words themselves have meaning only based on the context in which they're presented. So the study that you referred to, right? It's really interesting because it gives you a lot of that indication, as you said it rightly, that body language and tone of voice is immensely important, right? Immensely important. Whether content is really 7%, not exactly true, because from that study, it was for very specific
a very specific use case of communication. They were showing pictures and it was about likes and dislikes. So that's when you get away with that little content. I always like to say that content is your king. And for me, I always go back to actually think about Stephen Hawkins, right? No delivery. Zero body language, zero tone of voice, right? So the first thing you should always focus on is the content. And what you talked earlier, the impact, the value. That's first. And then you add that layer of personality to your business, right? To your communication. And that's exactly what then comes on top. I have not found any research that gives you a value, but I personally don't really mind. I don't think you need research. What you need is you need to create that connection with the audience. And that's when you actually feel it, right? And that's also what is sometimes forgotten, that if you can feel a connection with the audience, if I feel that connection with you, it's much more important than looking at any value. So this is how much I should do. It's really about understanding what works and what doesn't.
Right. Well, in that sense, we can maybe even steer the meaning of words better by providing less context. In that, like you give Stephen Hawking as an example, right? It's just words.
It is.
So when he delivered his speeches and when he delivered his talks and was communicating, it was just words. And then we fill in the gaps when we listen, right? So I have a great deal of opportunity to create meaning when I listen to Stephen, because I'm adding tone of voice and inflection and and all of that stuff that's not there. He's not actually presenting it, but I'm adding that as a part of my filters as a listener. Okay, so in that sense, maybe the text of a novel, for example, a novel becomes incredibly meaningful because not just because of the chosen words of the author, but by the ability of the reader to apply meaning.
Absolutely, yes.
So would it be better then for all of us to just speak in text and forget the context, or like where are we going with that? Can we add meaning by removing a lot of the noise around what we're saying?
The delivery? No, I wouldn't say that, right?
Okay.
You're absolutely right. You make it better. And if you think about Stephen Hawking, right? At first, a brilliant mind. There's very few of them. And of course, because he was in his own world, he had so much time to think his content through, right? I mean, that's all he did. So therefore, of course, there's very few that will get to that level of crafting that outstanding content. So yes, you can use context and you can use your voice and body language to add more context. And if you think about it, if you read your children, if you have any, if you read them a story, now I can say, well, a long, long time ago, there was this and that and this and that. And your child will appreciate it. But if you say, a long, long time ago, there was a beautiful princess, right?
Of course.
It's so easy, but it makes the story 10, 15, 20 times better.
Right.
And that's exactly what you're talking about, that you can add that layer.
That's right. No, I get that.
Yes.
And then so how important do you think it is for us to choose the right words? Okay, when we talk about text and context, how important is it for us to choose the right words and say them in the right order? Or can we just muddle our way through it if we want to?
Well, yes and no, right? Authenticity is important, and sometimes it's really important, and it really works to just say a few things.
But then doesn't it sound too rehearsed if we line up all the words? Or?
Well, yes and no, right?
Okay.
So let's look at two use cases, right? Think about the story of a refugee. I've been working this year with a few NGOs and also a few projects around diversity and sustainability and so on. And if you think about the story of a refugee, right? There's no rehearsed words, there's no rhetorical devices, just said as it is.
Right.
And it's very impactful, right? Because it's a real story.
Yeah.
So if you have that kind of content, you don't have to go into the side there where you need to prepare it. If you think about business, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's not always that impactful. There's no emotional connection. So we can use words, we can use tools like storytelling, we can use rhetorical devices to make our content better, to make our messages stick, and also to make our messages and give the audience the ability and the chance to engage with our messages and our content.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
And that's really what I would say. If you think about rhetorical devices, right? I'm a big fan because they're not that difficult.
Yeah.
I'm a German, right? So my English is not perfect. However, I can use some rhetorical devices to get my messages across, to make my language better and more impactful.
Yeah, sure.
And if you think about some of the most famous rhetorical devices being used, Martin Luther King, right?
Yes,
repetitive sentences.
Yep.
I have a dream.
Yeah.
And this is such an easy one, right?
What are the things that you say Like your
repetitive sentences.
No, but
all the time.
Give me an example of one of your axioms, your favorite axiom.
So I would say repetitive sentences, to use that one.
Yeah.
I would say, for example, together we can achieve that you become a better presenter in no time. Together we can learn how to create a real connection with the audience. And together we will make sure that you get that promotion that you're working towards in no time. And that's how you do it, right? And together, by the way, I just thought about together from the keynote of Mark Zuckerberg when he first presented the metaverse. If you have a read through that, if you have a listen through that, you can really see how they applied rhetorical devices all over the script.
Oh, amazing.
Which shows you that most likely Mark Zuckerberg didn't write the script, right? They had a professional script writer in there. Of course, right? Yeah. And if you look at politicians, one example, David Cameron, so many rhetorical devices, but it just sounds good.
Right.
Yeah, it sounds good, it works, and it just makes your messages really sink in with the audience.
Right. So let's change the context a little bit and move from like macro presentations, like stage, boardroom, even online, I would say is more of a macro presentation into micro presentation, like managers with their teams, employees with their employers, that kind of presentation. How important is presentation skills in creating meaningful context for people at work?
I say very, right? If you think about managers with their teams, right? Yeah. A manager has a challenging project, a deadline, or whatever it is, a challenge that he needs to communicate to his team.
Yeah.
Now, you can just go ahead and say to the team, this is how it is, or you can use a bit of a communication structure framework that helps the team to understand the necessity of this deadline, of this project, right? So you could use a framework, or you can also use just a different way of communicating. For example, another rhetorical device I love is analogies. Analogies are so powerful, right? Because they make you really understand something. Because you can just put out any complicated subject, or you can put it into a very simple context that everybody understands. Right. It's right in my world. I can just understand the logic. And then, of course, I'll be, okay, let's talk about your project. I'm now on board, and that's what you want.
Yeah. No, that's good. I like that. I think for me, understanding interpersonal communications is really important. And when you get presentation skills, you understand how to do interpersonal communications so differently. I find when we talk about the meaningfulness of words, most of us actually, we define ourselves in our quiet times by words that weren't even used by us. They're words that were used by others. So when we look at ourselves in the mirror and you say, oh, I'm too old, too young, too fat, too stupid, too ugly. I'm always getting passed over for the job, always getting passed over for the raise, like all of those things. Typically, those words don't come from us. They come from someone else, right? A person that we respect in our lives, a parent, a teacher, maybe a bully when we were younger, but maybe a boss, a bad boss. And I find that if bosses, managers, leaders in whatever position, if they call their teams idiots, their teams start to behave like idiots because that becomes the word that they use to define themselves. Well, of course, he feels that we're idiots, so the expectations are lower.
Very true. And then there's the negativity bias, right? Yes. That's the first thing that we cling on. That's our ancient brain that sees, there is something, there's a danger, there's something negative. We need to focus on that because that's how we survive.
Yeah.
Completely makes sense. It's not rocket science.
No, it's true.
To understand that.
It's a great opportunity then for managers to choose their words, to speak the kind of life into their teams that define their teams as the kind of teams that they want to be leading, even if it's not the kind of team that they think they're leading today.
Very true. Right.
Right. So the choice of words then becomes more meaningful, not just in communicating now, but creating or curating the kind of experience that that manager has with their team in the future.
Yes.
If you start to describe your team like champions, perhaps they'll start to behave like champions.
Very true.
Right? But I don't find that naturally in the business world. It's so cutthroat, so competitive, so individualistic. And one of the reasons why I've written the book, Business is Personal, and why we're doing this show is because I want us to remember that we're all just humans, right? Struggling for space and resources on the planet, trying to survive, trying to help our world become a little bit better than when we found it, express gratitude through our work for all of the generations of technology that we get to take advantage of that we didn't invent.
That's very true.
Yeah, and communication becomes a part of that because we speak into life. We speak into other people's lives, the kind of future that we hope for them. And if we call them dumb, then that's the future that we hope for them. And that negativity bias is going to cling that word into their minds, and then they'll start to behave in a way that fulfills that bias.
Absolutely. And it should be, right, that every manager inspires their team
100%.
to do more, to lead them, to fulfill their own potential. Yeah. And if you look at just that example of communication, I mean, if I look at my clients, who would they employ me to train?
Right.
Is it just the entire teams? No. It's the CEOs, it's the directors, it's the managers. And that's usually where it stops. But if you think about a retail concept and you just arrive at the counter, shouldn't that person be trained? Shouldn't that be one of the 100%. Best communicators in the company, because they're talking to the clients? And so many of them. But
so does that mean all of our managers need to be like little Martin Luther Kings with all of their teams, like standing on their desks saying, "I have a dream"? Or like, is there...
That's maybe too much. In some instances, I think it would be super cool.
Okay, so let's break it down to your top 3 tips. We want to make this actionable for the managers out there. Flo's top 3 tips for how to become a more inspiring manager in your communication, something that you can apply today.
Absolutely. Well, number 1, definitely storytelling.
Yeah, I
definitely
agree.
storytelling,
100%.
because storytelling is this great tool, right? It's our brain and how it makes sense of the world. This is really what it is. And we've been just transporting knowledge for centuries. This is all storytelling. Learn storytelling and embed stories into your content. And if you think about it, it is so easy. Every number that you present actually has a story behind it. Right. You just need to uncover it, and then you can present it. So therefore, storytelling would be number 1. Then number 2, definitely what you say, right? Business is personal. So learn to get your authentic personality more across. That would be definitely number 2. And honestly, for me, it took years. It really took years, because as a presenter, I mean, when I presented first, I was in fun sports event. It was surf contests and snowboard contests, and that's 12 years back now, right? So therefore, I got to do whatever I like. So when I then started presenting in Dubai, and was conferences, and the topics are sometimes quite out of my comfort zone or out of my knowledge. So therefore, of course, right, I go just into content and I forget about my human personality. And that's something that I had to find again and uncover and discover. And now I can do whatever I like again.
Amazing.
It's just in a way that makes sense for the audience. So also having that feeling, then how much of your authentic personality you can show to the world at which point in time without losing completely touch is very important. And that's definitely number 2 that I would say.
Okay.
Number 3 is very difficult, because there's so many tools. And I tell you why. Every person is different.
Yes.
So now to say you need to do more with your voice is not applicable for everybody. One thing I will say though is energy. Energy, right?
Right.
And you know why energy? Because when I first trained people, I would talk about passion.
Right.
And say you should be passionate in the way how you speak. However, now, as a presenter, if I say I'm talking about code, is Flo passionate about code? No. Will I ever be passionate about code? No.
So how can we be authentic?
Exactly.
Right.
So if I would be like, oh, code is the best thing in the world, and this wouldn't work. However, will the organizer hire me to stand in front of the audience and say, hey, code is so exciting? No, right?
No,
they want somebody with energy, and that's what I can manipulate, right? I can choose whether I'm standing in front of you and say, well, Business as Personal is such a great book. I can say Business as Personal is such a great book, right? And that's my own energy. It's my voice. It's my body language. That's something that I can own. And that's why energy is a really great tool. And once you understand that, you can just raise the bar. And that's really cool, because the bigger the audience is, or the more important something is, you can just raise that energy level. And that's something that everybody can learn, and something that makes a tremendous impact on your content as well.
No, I like the differentiation between energy and passion. I haven't heard that before. Passion actually originally comes from, it's Latin, passio, it means suffering. Right? So people don't get that about passion. Like, passion requires the sacrifice. And I think that meaning of passion definitely ties in to the manipulation of energy for the sake of communication.
Yes.
When you bring energy into something that you yourself might not be heartfelt passionate about, but for the sake of the people that you're talking to and the importance that it has in their lives, even if it's not that important in your life.
Exactly.
Code might not be something that you're super passionate about, but you can be passionate about communicating to them in such a way that it's appropriate and impactful and immediately applicable.
Exactly.
Right?
Very
so
true.
that becomes the passion, is not the code, not the content, but the context.
Exactly.
That's what you become passionate about. That's where the energy comes from.
Exactly. But that's a pro technique, right? So
100%.
So just to jump in here, that was my original approach, which really works well. And at the manager level, you can find that. However, not everybody has yet that sophisticated skills. So that's why I really broke it down to energy, because energy is easier to manipulate.
Right.
And then you've got another tool that is just related to that. And that's, of course, the voice, right?
Yeah.
So you start training people on their voice.
Yeah.
And then as a matter, what happens then afterwards is your body language improves. The energy just goes up overall.
Yeah, sure.
That's why the energy is easier. And then, of course, right, finding things that you can be passionate around. That's where Corrie takes people then to the next level.
All right. So this is your full-time job, is helping people to become better communicators.
Exactly. Okay, I work either as a presenter or as a communication coach.
I know. So I want to ask you, Business is Personal, the show, is about trying to help connect people passionately with their work. So I want to ask you, what is the most meaningful part of your job? What gives you the most amount of life from what you do?
Well, honestly, it's exactly what I said earlier. That example of a sports coach who I do public speaking skills, and just to expand on that story, right? So he was somebody from Africa who didn't have a lot of money, and I decided, hey, of course, I'm helping a brother, right? So he got a really crazy discount, and I said, you just need to work hard. That's all I want. Yeah. So we did our 10 sessions, and then as a result, he writes 2 books, right? To be able to help somebody to get their potential out. That's the biggest reward that you can get. Right?
No, it's so true.
That's really something for me that is fantastic.
I share that with you as well.
It really is. It really is. And then on top of that as well, that I was able to honestly create my dream job just by refining my skills is, again, for me, fantastic. And I have to say, right, it was a journey of almost 10 years. I had a coach who sent me to Toastmasters and reminded me that back in the day you were passionate about hosting events. Is this maybe something you want to go back? And that's really how my journey started. So therefore, giving other people now that opportunity through communication to fulfill their potential. Sure. Fantastic.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Flo. I really appreciate it. This has been such an amazing, fun conversation. Do you want to play a game with me quickly before we go?
Anytime.
Okay, you ready? We're gonna do word association.
Oh boy.
Yeah. I'm gonna say one word and you're gonna tell me as fast as you can what comes to mind. You ready?
Okay.
Fun.
Board sports.
Board sports.
I love surfing. I love snowboarding.
Ready?
Nothing.
Work.
Remote.
Joy.
Family.
Team.
Together.
Lifestyle.
Dubai.
Oh, very good. I love it. Thank you so much. That was really fun.
Thank you,
it's
Corrie.
been a real joy to have you. This is such a good conversation. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Business is Personal. I hope it was valuable to you. Please comment, DM me. I want to hear from you. And if you haven't connected with me on LinkedIn, please do that now. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Do you feel disconnected at work? Are you feeling exhausted? Almost like you hate your job and secretly maybe your boss too? This is Business is Personal, a blueprint to discovering and creating meaning at work in collaboration with Smashy TV, a live streaming service in the Middle East for the driven, the dreamers, and the doers.